single-digit days until the NFL draft.
I love the draft.
Double-digit days until the Panthers make a pick.
Well,
but,
yes.
but single-digit days to the beginning of the draft. 9 days, 7 shows. We have 7 episodes of The Drive with Tim Donnelly until the NFL draft starts up. We're going day by day.
Sim!
I love Chappelle. The Chappelle show, it was a special moment in time. 7 shows, we're going position by position, looking at what they've done this offseason and kind of previewing what could happen during the draft for each position. And today, we are moving just a half step out from where we were yesterday. We were interior defensive line. Now we're edge rushers. Maybe more than a half step. A couple yards. Edge rushers. Here's what I have to say about the edge rushers for the Carolina Panthers. The Canes know the Canes. Rewind. The Panthers know that they look dumb if their edge rushers don't get to the quarterback this year. DJ Wanham and Jadeveon Clowney, their 2 free agent acquisitions, have to get to the quarterback. Do you know why? Because the Panthers moved on from Brian Burns, and they didn't even get a first-round pick back. If you move on from Brian Burns, you're saying we can find that production elsewhere. We don't have to give him $30 million a year. We can find it somewhere else. Then they brought in Wanham. They brought on Clowney. So those 2 are part of the group that has to get it done. And they are the headliners. Right? I use Gladys Knight and the Pips as kind of an example. This is Wanham, Clowney, and the Pips. The next most accomplished or biggest name edge rusher on the team, K'Lavon Chaisson. He is a former first-rounder by the Jags. You want to hear some stats? He has 5 sacks in 4 years. He's averaging a good 1.25 sacks a year. Amari Barno still around. DJ Johnson, should we go down how that pick has worked out?
Don't get me started.
Leota, not a lot of depth. Not much depth. So guess what? If you have a position that is as important as edge rusher, that you made as bold a stance on in this postseason, like moving on from Brian Burns, and there's a draft coming up, guess what? I can connect dots, right? Guess what that tells me?
What's that?
They're going to draft one. They're going to draft one, and they're probably going to look for a veteran after the draft in addition to it. But here's the thing. If the right guy is there, in the second round, it's not a bad pick. I know there's a lot of talk about you need to get a wide receiver, and I do think they need to get a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. A lot of talk about some other positions, centers, corners. I hear you. If there's somebody you have a first-round edge rusher grade on, and they're available at 33, that's never a bad pick. Never. And I would tell teams that are calling to trade up, say, listen, there's somebody we want here. If you want to trade up to 33, you have to make it worth our while because there's a position of premium that we could take right now, and it will never be a bad pick. Never. Same is true for 39. They have picked 33 and 39 in the second round, 2 top 10 in the second round picks. I wouldn't say that they should. I mean, they shouldn't take both. Right? They shouldn't be 2 edge rushers, but if they evaluate someone highly and he's available there, you can take one of them, especially if this wide receiver class is as deep as everybody says it is. They have high rankings on them, and there's 4 or 5 of them available when they're picking at 33. You can be confident one might be there at 39, and you can take your edge rusher at 33. You will not hear me complain about that pick. Think about everything that everybody said about why they had to pay Brian Burns. Because the position is that important. Because it is a passing league. Because one of the few ways to get a team off schedule, meaning into third and long, into basically positions where a defense has the advantage, is by getting the quarterback on the ground with a sack. It's becoming more important. It's more difficult to guard downfield. The rules are constantly making it more difficult on defensive backs, And the only way sometimes to help those defensive backs is make them guard for 2.5 seconds rather than 3.5 seconds. If Brian Burns up there with a very talented defensive line in New York with the Giants starts making some plays, the Panthers know they're going to have to make plays of their own, or else they're going to be wearing a dunce cap. I would not be surprised if, despite all of the, you need this position, you need that position, you need this position, the Panthers simply go best player available if that best player is an edge rusher, and then look at everybody else and say we couldn't pass on him. I will not complain about that. If you go best player available and take like a running back or an off-ball middle linebacker or a center, sometimes you will hear me go, I don't care if that's the best player available. You need to think positional importance. Mm-hmm. If there is a best player available at edge rusher, you will not hear me complain, even if I think the roster has bigger gaps elsewhere. They'll draft one, so be ready. I would say I'd be very surprised if they go through day 2 and don't leave with an edge rusher of some kind. Very surprised. Now you could say, right, the money and the picks, like one of those second-round picks they got back for Brian Burns, if you solve that problem there, then you come out actually winning the trade, right? Then you've saved a ton of money. You spent it on the offensive line. You've bolstered another part of your roster. If you're still getting 7-8 sacks from whoever else you can pick up there, plus if Jadeveon Clowney finally lives up to all of his physical potential at this stage in his career, be an interesting step up.
It would.
If he has his first double-digit sack season, then all of a sudden Dan Morgan put those sunglasses on and go walking around like a cool guy. Him and Dave Canales, with all that gel in their hair, go around looking like a cool guy.
I have a stat for you from last season.
I love stats.
So, to provide a little context here, in terms of total number of sacks, the Carolina Panthers were not very high across the league. Granted, provide some context. They were trailing in a lot of games and teams were running the football, so the opportunity to get sacks was not as high. So you go to what's a stat they have called sack percentage. So number of dropbacks versus the amount of times you actually get a sack. Carolina Panthers were 31st in the NFL in sack percentage last year. So just over 5% of the opposing team's dropbacks, they got a sack. So, for example, if the opposing team dropped back 40 times in a game, 40 times to throw the football, the Panthers would have gotten just 2 sacks of those 40 dropbacks. That's it.
And that was with Brian Burns.
That was with Brian Burns.
But I'll also say this. Defensive players feast on passing situations.
Sure.
When the offense helps you get up by double figures, and now the other team has to try to throw their way back into it, they're going to drop back. As I've used this stat a ton, and it's like I use it because it's comical, but also true. The Panthers led for 0 plays in the fourth quarter last year. They had 2 wins, but they both came on game-winning field goals, which means zero games was the other team in a fourth quarter we have to throw to get back in this situation, which makes it very difficult for defenses to keep up the sack numbers because they can't pin their ears back and go, I know you got to throw it.
By the way, the Panthers last season only had 1 strip sack. So when you sack the quarterback, you also force a fumble. They only had 1. It was on the 3rd play of the first game.
That game 1?
It was 3rd play of the first game. Brian Burns strip sack Desmond Ridder, and Ridder fell on the football. That's the only time all season it happened.
That's why you draft an edge rusher.
That's why you got to upgrade there.
That's why you draft an edge rusher. They're going to draft one. Where and who? That'll be hashed out in the war room, but they will draft an edge rusher.